It's happening again. Labour's war on business is reaching boiling point, and this time it's Gales Bakery chairman Luke Johnson leading the charge. Rachel Reeves's latest tax hikes, hitting businesses with rising employer national insurance contributions and national living wage costs, have sparked outrage across the business world. And Johnson, he's not holding back. Check out this clip of Luke Johnson tearing into Rachel Reeves's disastrous fiscal agenda. Su de video.
That this government has overseen in the British economy. What's gone right, what's gone wrong?
As far as I'm aware, nothing has gone right, and almost everything they've done has gone wrong. I think they are a disaster. I would accept they inherited a pretty awful set of circumstances. Post-war high levels of tax and debt, much higher interest rates than we've experienced before. There were many of the elements that could lead to a recession. I'm now convinced there will be a recession in 2025. We've probably already entered one. I think the mood amongst the entrepreneurs and investors I speak about this country is more depressing than I can remember in 40 years in business.
The Labour government has spent months insisting that their policies will bring economic stability and long-term growth. But the reality, Britain's businesses are sounding the alarm, warning that these reckless tax hikes will have devastating consequences for jobs, wages and the cost of living. And at the centre of the storm is Rachel Reeves, whose blunderous economic policies are sending businesses into panic mode. Luke Johnson is a man who knows business. He's built successful companies, he's managed through economic crises, and he understands the realities of job creation. And yet, under Reeves's leadership, he says Britain is already in a recession, not a feared one, not an impending one, an active recession, unfolding right now as we speak. Reeves, instead of reversing course, has chosen to double down on the very policies that strangle businesses: national insurance hikes, higher wage costs, an ever-growing pile of regulations. It's all coming together to create an economic nightmare. And the worst part? This is only the beginning. Johnson's biggest warning wasn't just about tax increases, it was about the ideological obsession that Labour refuses to abandon: net zero 2050. The American government, he pointed out, is already scaling back their climate policies, moving away from crippling restrictions on energy and industry. And yet, Britain is still charging forward. Even as our electricity costs skyrocket, our industries struggle, and businesses are left footing the bill for Labour's utopian dreams. Trying to become a world leader in net zero with our incredibly high electricity costs, that's economic suicide, Johnson declared. And he's right. The consequences of this reckless push will be felt by everyone. Higher energy bills, higher food prices, higher costs across the board. Yet Reeves and the Labour government seem determined to ignore reality. The outrage isn't limited to small businesses. Some of Britain's biggest retailers, Sainsbury's, Tesco, are now publicly pleading with Labour to reverse these disastrous tax hikes. Their message is clear. Reeves's policies will lead to job cuts, price hikes, and a weaker economy. But Labour, as always, refuses to listen. And then there's the issue of regulation, which Johnson argued is another major barrier to economic growth. Property planning laws, he said, are making it nearly impossible to build in the UK. Red tape, bureaucracy, delays. Every new project is met with obstacles that slow down progress and drive up costs. We have to cut the bureaucracy and let businesses grow, he insisted. And if Labour doesn't take immediate action, the UK's economy will continue stagnating under the weight of government interference. Yet despite all of this, Johnson had an incredible revelation. Gales Bakery is expanding. 35 new locations are set to open this year alone, the biggest expansion in the company's history. It's proof that some businesses will survive Labour's economic assault, but how many others will be left behind? Johnson is refusing to let Labour's failures hold his company back, but not all businesses have that luxury. Because here's the reality, not every company will make it. While Gales can power through, many small and medium-sized businesses won't be so lucky, and that's the real danger of Labour's economic strategy. The destruction of businesses that can't afford to absorb these massive tax hikes. And if Labour's economic disaster wasn't bad enough, they are also failing to tackle the biggest crisis facing Britain today: mass migration. The numbers are in, and they are staggering. The UK's population is set to grow by nearly 5 million over the next decade, and almost all of that growth will come from net migration. The Office for National Statistics has confirmed what critics have been warning for years. Britain's immigration policies are completely out of control. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp is one of the few politicians willing to call it out. He's demanding an immediate, legally binding cap on visas before it's too late. His warning was clear: this does not need to happen. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. Think about what this means. 5 million more people in just 10 years. Public services already on the brink will be pushed even further. Housing shortages will worsen, wages will be driven down, and costs of living will rise even higher. Yet Labour's response? Silence. Philp is right to demand action, but will Labour actually do anything? Or will they continue down this path of uncontrolled migration and economic collapse? And speaking of Labour's failures, let's talk about Keir Starmer's latest humiliation on the world stage. Because in a moment that should concern every single Brit, Starmer just refused to back Denmark in its growing dispute with Donald Trump over Greenland. Yes, Greenland. And no, this isn't some bizarre joke. This is Donald Trump once again making headlines with his long-standing ambition to buy the Arctic island from Denmark. But when Starmer was pressed on whether he would stand by our ally, his response? I'm not going to comment on that. This is supposed to be Britain's leader, a man who claims he wants to restore Britain's place in the world. And yet, when faced with a major international issue involving our allies, he chooses to stay silent. It's weakness, plain and simple. And even his own party is furious. Diane Abbott, of all people, has come out attacking Starmer, calling him terrified of Trump. What's even more astonishing is that Britain might actually have a role to play in this dispute, thanks to a century-old treaty that Labour seems to have conveniently forgotten. Under a 1917 agreement, if Greenland were ever to be sold, Britain actually has first rights to buy it. So here's the situation. Labour is destroying businesses with reckless tax hikes. Labour is failing to control migration, even as population projections spiral out of control. And Labour's leader is too weak to take a stand on an international issue that could directly impact Britain's interests. This is the government that promised competence, the government that promised economic growth, the government that claimed it would stand strong on the world stage. And yet, just months into Labour's rule, we have businesses warning of disaster, immigration spiralling out of control, and a Prime Minister who can't even back Britain's allies. How much more of this can Britain take? What do you think about Labour's economic failures? Is Rachel Reeves pushing businesses to the brink? Should Britain introduce a visa cap? And what on earth is Starmer doing on the world stage? Let us know in the comments. If you want more updates, hit that subscribe button, smash that like, and stay tuned, because Labour's mess is just getting started, and we're bringing you every scandalous moment as it happens. Mass migration warning. Labour slammed an explosive live interview.